The story begins inside a children's book, where a boy named Harold lives. When he is just a baby, he is given a very special purple crayon. Anything he draws with it becomes real. To keep from feeling lonely, Harold draws to friends a moose and a porcupine. From that moment on, using his magical crayon, he begins creating an entire world inside the book. There, he goes on incredible adventures with them, building landscapes, roads, and anything else he needs. As the years pass, Harold grows up and becomes a clever adult, able to solve any problem simply by drawing the solution. But one day, while he is creating things like always, a huge question suddenly comes to mind. If he can draw everything, who drew him? Out of nowhere, he hears a mysterious voice claiming to be his creator. The voice explains that he was drawn using the same crayon and that it exists in the real world, a place full of color, but far more complicated than the fantasy world inside the book. Even though the creator warns him not to try to go there, Harold becomes obsessed with the idea of discovering that other reality. The next morning, he tries to speak to the voice again, but there is no response. Harold and his friends search all over their world inside the book, but they find no sign of the creator. Determined to uncover the truth, Harold once again uses his purple crayon and draws a portal to the real world. Without thinking twice, he steps through it. And as he does, he takes on human form in a three-dimensional reality filled with colors and details he has never seen before. Amazed by everything around him, he looks at this new world in awe. His friends decide to follow him. The moose crosses first, but in the process leaves the porcupine behind. Just like Harold, the moose transforms into a human upon entering the real world. Shortly after, he manages to reunite with Harold. Meanwhile, Harold spots an elderly man sitting in a plaza and, convinced that he might be his creator, runs to hug him. But the man responds by hitting him with his cane, making it clear that he is not the person Harold is looking for. So Harold and Moose continue their search. Harold draws a bicycle with his purple crayon, and the two of them head toward the city. A little later, the porcupine also manages to open the portal and cross into the real world. She now takes the form of a young punk woman and is thrilled with her new appearance. Without realizing that her friends are nearby, she starts looking for them on her own. As Harold and Moose ride their bicycle, they almost crash into the car of a mother and her son. In the shock of the moment, Moose briefly reverts to his original form, but quickly returns to his human appearance. Even so, both of them end up on the ground. The mother, Terry, steps out worried and rushes to help them. The small accident leaves the car with a flat tire, so she tries to call for help. But without her noticing, Harold draws a brand new tire with his crayon, instantly solving the problem. Terry's son, Mel, is completely amazed. Grateful, Terry offers to take them home and even lets them spend the night in her garage. Later that night, Mel shows Harold his own drawings. Harold is impressed by the boy's creativity. Mel then asks how he created the tire, and Harold explains that he does everything with his purple crayon. Even though it looks like an ordinary crayon, Harold lets him try it. Mel draws a creature in the air, half fly, half spider, and to his surprise, it comes to life. The two of them start having fun creating things with the crayon without imagining the consequences. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the porcupine follows clues about her friends until she reaches a huge mansion. Without thinking much about it, she goes inside, puts on the owner's clothes, and starts eating food from the refrigerator. But it is not long before the security alarm goes off. Luckily, she manages to escape by jumping over the garden fence. However, her escape is captured on a security camera. The next morning, Terry comes downstairs ready to go to work and finds several cakes sitting on the table. Confused, she goes to ask what is going on. She finds Harold, Mel, and Moose calmly drinking coffee. Harold explains that he created the cakes with his purple crayon and even used it to repaint the house. Of course, Terry does not believe a single word. For her, all of this is just a strain. So without hesitation, she tells Harold and his friend that it is time for them to leave. Harold and Moose agree that they should go, but before leaving, Harold gives Mel a small piece of his purple crayon as a thank you gift. The boy, thrilled, decides to help them find Harold's creator. The only clue they have is that the creator is probably an older man. So every time they see an elderly man on the street, Harold runs up and hugs him, convinced he has finally found his creator. But things never go well. At one point, a man even throws him to the ground with a wrestling move and walks away like nothing happened. Even after that hard hit, Harold notices a flyer on the ground about the city library. He decides it might be the perfect place to look for clues. To get there faster, he draws a skateboard and a pair of roller skates with his crayon, and the three of them head off. At the library, they meet Gary, a librarian who writes fantasy stories, but for adults. When he sees Mel, he offers to help them, though in truth, he is mostly trying to impress Terry, since he has feelings for her. They try searching online, but they do not have enough information to find Harold's creator. Tired of getting nowhere, Gary suggests something different. Instead of looking for the creator, why not make the creator look for them? The idea excites Harold. They leave the library, and he starts drawing a massive airplane with his purple crayon. Gary, watching from the window, is stunned when he realizes the crayon is actually magical. It reminds him of an old book titled Harold and the Purple Crayon, created by Crockett Johnson. After doing some research, he discovers that Harold is a fictional character from that story. In that moment, Gary understands that fantasy has become reality, and he realizes something else too. If he can get that crayon, he could finally become a truly famous writer. Meanwhile, Harold, Moose, and Mel fly over the city in the newly created airplane. Once they reach the clouds, Harold releases colorful smoke and writes Terry's phone number across the sky along with a clear message, "Old man, call me." But things quickly go wrong. Because of the plane's movements, Moose briefly turns back into his original Moose form and accidentally punctures the aircraft. This triggers the ejector seats, sending all three of them flying into the air. Luckily, Harold reacts quickly and draws a parachute that saves them just in time. By pure coincidence, they land near Mel's school. He is already late for class. Harold and Moose drop him off and proudly admire the giant message they left in the sky. What they did not expect was that several elderly men would start calling Terry, thinking she was looking for a husband. Poor Terry receives dozens of calls while at work, and her boss scolds her for using her phone. The day was already strange, but it gets worse when Harold and Moose show up at the supermarket where she works. Terry soon discovers that they were the ones who put her number in the sky and, furious, demands that they leave. At that exact moment, she gets another call, this time from the school principal. Mel got into a fight and broke another student's nose. Terry needs to go pick him up, but if she leaves her shift, her boss will fire her. With no other choice, she accepts Harold and Moose's help. She gives them supermarket uniforms and asks them to reorganize products from one shelf to another. At first, they obey, but they quickly get bored of moving boxes and decide to help customers on their own. Moose becomes distracted by a huge television on sale and stands there fascinated, wearing headphones so he can listen to everything at once. Meanwhile, Harold pulls out his purple crayon and starts solving problems, though not exactly in the best way. He first tries to help an elderly woman reach a product on a high shelf, but instead of simply handing it to her, he draws springs on her shoes. The woman starts bouncing uncontrollably and ends up tripping. Then Harold sees a little boy playing with a toy helicopter and decides to make it more exciting by drawing real propellers on it. The problem is, the toy actually starts flying for real, spinning out of control and causing chaos all over the store. Minutes after the supermarket disaster, Terry returns to work, only to find the place completely destroyed. Everything is a mess. She goes straight to confront Harold and Moose, But when the manager finds out that she was the one who allowed them to stay, he fires her on the spot. Although she is frustrated and upset, Mel steps in. He explains that Harold and Moose were only trying to help, and that maybe losing that job is not the end of the world. Slowly, Terry begins to see it differently. Maybe, deep down, she needed a change. She decides to accept the two friends' apology, and the four of them end up taking a walk through the park. During the walk, Terry shares something very personal. Her real dream was always to become a professional pianist. But ever since her husband passed away, she has felt unmotivated and stopped believing in herself. Harold cannot resist trying to help. While Terry is distracted, he quietly pulls out his purple crayon and draws a piano in the middle of the park. When she sees it, she is speechless. Harold encourages her to play something. Even though she is nervous because she has not practiced in a long time, she finally sits down at the piano. As soon as she starts playing, everyone realizes the talent is still there. Gradually, people gather around, drawn by the music, and in the end they applaud her enthusiastically. But not everything is peaceful. In the distance, two detectives named Love and Silva are investigating the complaint filed by the elderly man with the cane, the same man Harold mistook for his creator days earlier. Thanks to the park's security cameras, they now have photos of the suspects and are tracking them down. They are also looking for the young punk woman, the porcupine, after the mansion's cameras captured her face. Meanwhile, she continues searching for her friends. Following traces of purple, she arrives at a restaurant where she notices several objects and even food stained that color. There, she argues with the waitress and, annoyed by her attitude, decides to eat as much as she can without pain. When the manager tries to stop her, she jumps onto the tables and runs off. Just outside, by pure coincidence, the detectives are parked nearby. As soon as they see her, they recognize her and begin chasing her. She manages to lose them by hiding high up in a tree, but the pursuit is far from over. Back at the park, Terry finishes her performance and receives a big round of applause. At that moment, Gary appears, conveniently driving by. He approaches to congratulate her on her talent and tells Harold that he has discovered who his creator is. He promises to help them find him. However, Mel does not fully trust Gary. There is something suspicious about his attitude. Even so, Terry decides it is time to head back home. Harold and Moose stay behind with Gary, who takes them to a secluded area of the park. There, he shows them something astonishing, a copy of the original book Harold and the Purple Crayon. He explains that they are characters created by the author Crockett Johnson, and that somehow, that fantasy became real. In the middle of the conversation, the porcupine finally appears and reunites with her friends. But the reunion does not last long. Detective Silver suddenly bursts in, tackles the porcupine, and arrests her. Harold and Moose are also handcuffed, and the three of them end up in jail. To make matters worse, the purple crayon is locked away at the police station. Still, they refuse to give up. When another inmate is brought into the cell, the porcupine creates a distraction that allows Moose to slip away unnoticed by the guard. He manages to retrieve the purple crayon and passes it back to Harold. Without wasting a second, Harold draws a massive iron wrecking ball and uses it to smash through the prison walls. Within seconds, they are free once again. The next morning, the three of them ride a motorcycle to Mel's school. Mel spots them through the classroom window and runs out excited to greet them. But the same classmates he fought with earlier start bothering him again. This time, they lock him inside a storage room and make fun of him. However, Mel remembers something important. He still has the small piece of the purple crayon that Harold gave him. Using the fragment he kept in his pocket, Mel draws his imaginary friend Carl, a creature that is half dragon, half bird. And as usual, the drawing comes to life. Carl, with his enormous strength, smashes the storage room door and frees Mel. The boy runs to reunite with Harold, Moose, and the porcupine, and the four of them decide to go together to find Crockett Johnson. Mel uses his phone to locate the address of his house, which is in a wooded and fairly isolated area. After a long trip, they finally arrive. Excited, Harold rushes to the door, ready to finally meet the one who gave him life. But when the door opens, it is not his creator who appears. It is a woman who sadly informs them that Crockett Johnson passed away long ago. The house is now a museum dedicated to his work, including the book Harold and the Purple Crayon. The news leaves them in shock, especially Harold. Suddenly, everything makes sense. That is why the voice disappeared. Why it never answered again. Soon after, Terry arrives at the museum. The school principal had informed her that Mel was missing, and she is furious. She scolds her son for leaving without telling her and makes it clear to Harold that he needs to stay away from them. Ever since he showed up, he has only brought trouble. Harold apologizes and, devastated, begins to think that maybe he has always done everything wrong. In the middle of that painful moment, Moose and the porcupine notice something strange. The bicycle Harold had created with the crayon begins to fade away. And not only that, they themselves start to slowly disappear, as if the magic is losing its strength. The situation gets worse when the spare tire Harold had drawn for Terry's car vanishes in the middle of the road. She and Mel nearly get into an accident. While waiting for help, it becomes clear that the magic is fading. Discouraged, Harold walks alone down the road until Gary pulls up in his car. He tells Harold he can help fix everything and convinces him to return to the library. On the way, they pass by Terry's car. Mel sees Harold with Gary and senses that something is not right. When they arrive home, Mel notices that the paint Harold created is also disappearing. He becomes truly worried and tries to convince his mom that they need to help Harold, but she tells him to stay in his room. Hours later, Harold arrives at the library and asks Gary to return the crayon so he can restore everything back to normal. Gary pretends to agree, but he has other plans. Instead of helping him, he draws a dungeon and chains Harold inside. Tired of waiting at home, Mel sneaks out to help his friend. But when he reaches the library, Gary captures him too. Without wasting time, the villain destroys the floor and ceiling with the crayon, leaving Harold and Mel trapped with no way out. Then he draws a carriage and escapes. Fortunately, Mel still has the small piece of the crayon. With it, he draws keys to unlock the chains and then creates a giant balloon so he and Harold can escape together. As they chase after Gary, Mel's bravery helps Harold believe in himself again. And in that moment, his magic begins to return. Back at home, Terry goes into her son's room and discovers he is gone. She runs to her car to look for him, and just then she sees the paint on the house reappearing. It is proof that Harold's magic was real. Determined, Terry sets out to find him. Finally, Harold and Mel catch up to Gary in the park. They use a hook to pull him out of the carriage, and Harold demands that he return the crayon. Gary refuses. He challenges him. And so, a duel begins. Both of them pull out their crayons, and a true magical battle starts. Harold draws a rope to tie Gary up, but Gary quickly fights back by creating an axe and cutting it in half. Then he draws a medieval weapon, a spiked ball attached to a chain, and charges at Harold. Harold defends himself by drawing a giant fan that blasts Gary backward, but Gary refuses to give up. He creates a catapult and launches a massive rock straight at him. Thinking fast, Harold draws several circles beneath his feet, forming a huge spring that sends the rock flying back into the catapult. Gary seems defeated. Harold moves in to retrieve the crayon, but in one last desperate act, the villain swallows it. Immediately, the crayon's magic begins to surge inside his body, and he transforms into a powerful sorcerer. Just seconds after Gary becomes this dark magician, Terry arrives, desperately searching for her son, only to find the entire place turned into a battlefield. Now filled with power, Gary takes advantage of the moment and offers Terry the chance to join him in creating a new kingdom. He promises that together they could build something extraordinary. Without hesitation, Terry refuses. Angered, Gary summons a double-bladed spear and uses his magic to transform the entire area into a massive pool of lava. The ground melts, the heat rises, and the situation becomes critical. Harold tries to run toward Terry and Mel to protect them, but the lava forces him back. In the middle of the chaos, he drops his crayon. and for a moment, everything seems lost. But Mel does not give up. Once again, he draws his friend Carl. The small dragon bird comes to life and flies straight toward Gary, breathing fire at the sorcerer. However, Gary counters by drawing chained metal balls that strike Carl and knock him injured to the ground. Gary declares himself victorious, convinced that no one can stop him. And just when it seems like it is all over, Moose and the porcupine reappear, fully restored. The porcupine manages to grab the crayon and hands it back to Harold. Without wasting a second, Harold draws a new creature, a fly spider, just like the one Mel created before. He sends it flying straight toward Gary, and the creature flies right into his mouth. At that exact moment, Moose attacks. For a split second, he returns to his original moose form and charges the villain with his antlers. The impact is so powerful that Gary spits out the fly spider and the purple crayon he had swallowed. As soon as the crayon leaves his body, all the dark magic disappears. The fire goes out, the lava fades away. Everything returns to normal. Defeated, Gary admits that he did all of this because he wanted his own fantasy world to become real. He only wanted his stories to come to life. Despite everything, Harold decides to grant him that wish. With the crayon, he draws a portal that leads to the fantasy world from Gary's books. Satisfied, the librarian steps through. To make sure he causes no more trouble, Harold closes the portal, and Carl destroys it with his flame. The next day, Harold and his friends visit the museum dedicated to Crockett Johnson. There, Harold looks at the original drawings and sketches created by his author. He is deeply moved to see where everything began. Even so, one question remains in his heart. Why was he created? The museum caretaker hands him a letter written by the author himself. In it, he explains that Harold was created as a symbol of the power of imagination. His intention was always to inspire children to be creative and to build their own worlds with their ideas. Those words fill Harold with joy. At last, he understands his purpose. With a peaceful heart, he uses the purple crayon one final time to draw a portal back to his world inside the book. Before saying goodbye, Mel gives him a box of colored crayons so he can bring even more life to his home. Harold, Moose, and the porcupine are grateful for everything they experienced in the real world, and they step through the portal. Back in their fantasy world, they are ready to begin new adventures. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think about this movie.